All right, so today's lesson, we talked about percents and what a percent was, because a percent was out of what?
100.
Out of 100. So we are now going to go ahead and move into actually using our knowledge and converting. Today's lesson is only going to be, we have a total of 6 type of conversions. But today, we're just going to talk about a percent to decimal and a decimal to percent. So if you could open up the one that says percent to decimal. All right, so I'm just going to kind of put this on here, percent to decimal, because I'm all about the visual part of this. All right, so if we are given a percent and it asks us to change it to a decimal, we have several different steps. Super duper duper easy. How easy? Super duper. Okay, the very first step that is going to be involved is we remove the percent sign by rewriting the number. That's going to be our first step. Then step 2, we are going to move the decimal wherever it is. Remember, if the number does not tell me where the decimal is, where do we always assume it's going to be?
At the end of the
At the end. All right. So we move the decimal 2 places to the left. Which is the actual math part of it, is we're actually dividing, very good, by 100. Okay, so as you're writing this down, I'm gonna go ahead and tell y'all. Y'all all know I've been on American Idol. I'm like the world's best singer there is. I just sometimes come up with my own songs, or I come up with a version of songs that relate to math. So, I gotta stand up for this one. How many of y'all have ever seen Madagascar? Just raise your hand. All right. The biggest thing that they talk about is I like to what?
Move it.
No, it doesn't. It's not I like to move it. It's I like to move it, move it. You like to move it, move it. We like to move it. Okay. But the biggest part is that I like to what? Move it, move it. Huh. That's quite interesting. Move it, move it. How many times did I say move it?
2.
Huh. And how many times am I moving it here?
2.
So when we're changing a percent to a decimal, we're gonna move it to the what?
Left.
Left. So, I want everybody to sing it. I like to
Move it, move it.
You like to
Move it, move it.
Oh, come on. We have got to get a little bit better about it. Let's try this again. All right, let's get it with some enthusiasm. I like to
Move it, move it.
You like to
Move it, move it.
All right. So, we don't move it. We don't move it, move it, move it, move it. We do what? Move it, move it. Okay. So, we're going to move the decimal 2 places to the left. So, let's look at a few examples. Because we're going to have some examples of Madagascar in it. That's what I like to call it. Got a Madagascar it. A lot of my students say, do we have to write down the examples?
Yes.
You don't have to do anything. I would strongly recommend it because when you come to me and you need help and I say, where are your examples? Oh, I didn't have to write those down. Well, you're asking for help, so apparently you did need to write those down. So if I was given the number 14%, and I said I needed to change this to a decimal, my first step that I'm going to do says to remove the percent sign by rewriting the number. Okay. And where do we assume this decimal is? Because it didn't say, hey, decimal's right here.
At the end.
We always assume that it's going to be where? At the end. Okay. Now we've got to Madagascar it, and we got to go which direction? We have to move it. So I took that decimal, and I move it, and now it becomes decimal 1-4. Oh, so that's pretty easy, isn't it? Yeah. All right, let's look at another example. Let's see, think of a good one. Let's do 6.5%. All right. I am going to rewrite the percent, and I'm going to remove the percent sign by rewriting the numbers. So I'm going to do 6.5. I'm not done though. Does it tell me where my decimal is here?
Yes.
Yes. So I start there. How many times do I move it? 2 times, because I like to move it. Uh-oh, how do I do it if I need another one?
Add a 0.
Go ahead, ma'am.
So you move the decimal in front of the 6, then you put a 0 and you go.
You still have to move it, right? You can't just move it. So now it becomes decimal 0.65. Everybody see that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Let's look at a big percent. So looking at this percent, is it going to be, will there be a whole number?
Yes.
Yes, because it's more than 100%, right? Yes? All right, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to follow my same rules. I'm going to write it without my percent. Where do I assume my decimal is going? Is that? At the end. And because we are going to Madagascar it, we're going to move it, and it will become 1.20. So far, so good?
Yes.
All right. Close this for just a minute. I want to have you write something on here. I'm going to want you to write pretty dog left home. Oh, that's so sad, right? Isn't that sad?
No.
So sad. The pretty dog left home.
Sometimes.
That's just a nice little sentence that if I'm going percent to decimal, I'm going to go left. Percent to decimal, I go left. So you just need to remember that little saying, pretty dog left home. Because that's usually the problem that people get is they're like, which direction do I go? Do I go to the right or go to the left? Now dip, baby, dip. No, that's just my son. So, all right, now let's go. So we know how to change a percent to a decimal. Let's discuss changing it from a decimal to a percent. So, decimal to percent. It's all the way down here at the bottom. So decimal to percent. The very first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to do the exact opposite than what I did here. So if I look here, my first step was remove the, I'm going to do everything opposite. I'm going to start with 2, and I'm going to move the decimal two places to the, very good, right. Remember, I'm still, I like to move it, move it. You like to move it, move it. We just have to decide which direction. Then I have moved it. And I have to remember, because I do need it in a percent form, that I need to add the percent sign. I need to add the percent sign. A lot of times people will move it, but they forget to add the percent sign. Remember, we talked about that. That percent sign is very, very important. All right, so let's look at some examples. Examples. All right, so if I'm given 0.8 and I need to change it to a percent, tells me where my my decimal is, and I'm going to move it. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
I move it. So then I am going to add a 0 here. So it's going to become 80, what? Do I have to put that percent sign?
Yes.
Absolutely. Changing percents to decimals and decimals to percents, super easy. We just Madagascar it. I like to move it. So let's look at decimal 0 to 3. Go ahead and do that one. Take my decimal, I move it, and it becomes 2.3%. All right, what about this number? Huh. Did I tell you where the decimal was? So where do we assume that it is? So where do we assume this decimal is going to be? At the end? Does that change anything? Do I still have to move it?
Yes.
Absolutely. And I'm still going to move it, which will become a huge percent. 3,700%. But it's still a percent, right?
Yes, ma'am. It's 37.
Do what?
How can it be 3,700%?
It is a whole number.
Because it's already a whole number.
A whole number.
We can have numbers that are bigger than percents. I mean, bigger than 100%. Just means that you got extra credit on your test. All right. So just like we had this nice little saying here, pretty dog left home. This is my favorite one. We know we're going to have a D and a P, right? Because we're going decimal to percent. So, Dr. Pepper, because that's Miss Armstrong's kind of favorite drink. Dr. So it tells me decimal to percent, I move it which direction?
To the right.
To the right. Pretty dog, percent to decimal, I go left. Savannah, you had a question?
Yes. So if you were to look into the decimal and 2%, whenever we do the percentages, do you want us to put the decimal at the end of the whole number, or does it?
You do not have to. Remember, you don't have to if it's going to be assumed that it's there. So that's a really good question. If you didn't hear, she said, do we need to put the decimal right there? You don't have to, because we already assume that that's where it's at. Would I have to put the decimal here?
Yes.
Yes, because otherwise we would assume that it's something different, correct? All right. So we now have learned how to change a percent to a decimal and a decimal to a percent. So now we're going to do a little bit of practice.